They said a woman like me shouldn't be here. Not like this, not showing, not alone. The words didn't come all at once. They never do. They slipped between champagne glasses and polite smiles, wrapped in soft laughter that cut sharper than anything loud ever could. I stood there in heels that pinched and a dress that suddenly felt too tight around my waist, one hand resting just below my ribs, as if I could shield something no one had the right to judge. 24 weeks. That's what the doctor had said. 24 weeks, and everything in my life had changed, except the way people looked at me. Maybe it had only gotten worse. The ballroom smelled like expensive perfume and polished marble, the kind of place where every detail was perfect except the people inside it. I wasn't supposed to stand out. I knew how to blend in, smile when needed, speak when spoken to, keep my head down. But tonight, there was no hiding. Not anymore. Do you even know who the father is? Someone whispered, not quietly enough. A soft chuckle followed. Another voice joined in. Or is that part still up for negotiation? My throat tightened. I didn't look at them. I didn't give them that. Instead, I focused on the glass in my hand, untouched sparkling water catching the light like something fragile. My fingers trembled slightly, so I set it down before anyone could notice. Or maybe they already had. They always did. The room felt smaller by the second. Conversations dimmed around me, not because people stopped talking, but because I could only hear one thing now. Judgment. It hummed under everything, beneath every glance, behind every polite smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. I shifted my weight, adjusting the fabric over my stomach, pretending it was nothing, pretending I wasn't aware of every stare that lingered half a second too long. I had been invited here. That was the part that almost made it worse. I wasn't crashing someone else's world. I had been welcomed into it, and now I could feel it rejecting me in real time. Some women have no shame. Another voice said, louder this time, confident now that the room had chosen a side. I exhaled slowly, keeping my chin level. Don't react. That was the rule. If you react, you give them power. If you stay, still, maybe they get bored. Maybe they move on. But they didn't. Because people like me were entertainment. A cautionary tale dressed in something they could criticize. My phone buzzed softly in my clutch. Once. Then again. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I hadn't answered him in days. Not since the last message. Not since I decided that silence was easier than explaining a truth no one would believe anyway. My fingers tightened around the bag, but I didn't open it. Not yet. Not here. Not while every eye felt like it was waiting for me to break. The music swelled slightly, something classical and distant, completely disconnected from the tension wrapped around my chest. I inhaled, steadying myself, and lifted my gaze just enough to meet my reflection in one of the tall mirrors lining the wall. I looked composed, almost calm. You wouldn't know from the outside that everything inside me felt like it was cracking under pressure. I pressed my hand gently against my stomach, a quiet instinct, a silent promise. I wasn't alone. No matter what they said, no matter how loud it got. I wasn't alone. I just hadn't told them why. The silence did not break all at once. It shifted, subtle at first, like the air itself had paused, waiting. I felt it before I saw anything. The change. Conversations thinned. Laughter faded into something uncertain. Even the music seemed quieter, like it had stepped back to watch whatever was about to happen. I kept my eyes on the mirror a second longer, steadying my breath, pretending none of it mattered. But then the space behind me began to open. People moved. Not quickly. Not obviously. Just enough. Enough to create a path where there had been none seconds before. My chest tightened. I did not turn right away. I did not want to give them another reaction. But curiosity is a dangerous thing when the entire room is suddenly paying attention to something that is not you anymore. Slowly, I turned. The first thing I saw was the suit. Black. Perfectly tailored. The kind that did not wrinkle, did not shift, did not apologize for the space it took up. Then the shoes. Polished. Silent against the marble floor. And then him. Dominic Russo did not walk like other men. He did not need to. The room adjusted to him. People moved before he reached them, as if they already knew better. As if something about him made hesitation feel like a mistake. I had seen him before. Not in person. Not like this. But his name carried weight in places where money was only the beginning of power. My pulse stumbled. Just once. I felt it in my throat. In my fingertips. In the way my grip tightened around my clutch without me realizing it. He was not looking at anyone else. Not the women who straightened their posture as he passed. Not the men who suddenly looked interested in anything but him. Not the group who had been laughing just moments ago. He was looking at me. Directly. Unmistakably. And for a second, the noise inside my head went completely quiet. This did not make sense. It could not. Not here. Not like this. I felt heat rise under my skin, not from embarrassment this time, but from something sharper. Something that felt like exposure. Like he could see through everything I had tried to hold together tonight. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could catch the faint scent of something clean, expensive, controlled. Close enough that the rest of the room faded into a blur I could not quite focus on anymore. No one spoke. No one moved. It was not dramatic. It was not loud. It was just still. His eyes dropped, briefly, to where my hand rested against my stomach. Not staring. Not questioning. Just noticing. Then they lifted back to mine. And I felt it again. That shift. Like something invisible had just been decided. My breath caught, but I held my ground. I had been looked at all night. Judged. Measured. Reduced to something small. But this was different. This was not dismissal. This was not curiosity. This felt deliberate. Like I was the only thing in the room that mattered for reasons I did not understand yet. I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay steady when I finally spoke. Do you need something? It came out softer than I intended, but it did not break. His expression did not change. Not really. But something in his gaze sharpened, like he had been waiting for that exact moment. For me to speak. For me to acknowledge him. For the line between us to finally exist. And when he answered, his voice was low. Controlled. The kind that did not need volume to carry across a room that had already chosen to listen. Yes, he said. Just one word. Simple. But it landed like it meant more than it should have. Like it was the beginning of something I could not step away from anymore. The word lingered between us longer than it should have. Yes. It was not loud. It was not threatening. But it carried weight, the kind that pressed against my chest without touching me at all. I felt every pair of eyes in the room shift back toward us, cautious now, uncertain. The same people who had been whispering minutes ago were suddenly very interested in their drinks, their phones, anything that kept them from being noticed. I should have stepped back. That would have been the logical thing to do. Create distance. Protect what little control I still had. But my feet did not move. Neither did his. Dominic Russo did not repeat himself. He did not explain. He simply held my gaze like the answer was already understood, and I was the only one catching up. My pulse picked up again, steady but heavier now, like my body knew something I had not said out loud. I tightened my fingers against the fabric over my stomach, grounding myself in something real, something that was mine. I think you have the wrong person, I said quietly. It was the safest response I had. Neutral. Distant. It gave me a way out without making anything worse. Or at least that was what I hoped. His eyes did not leave mine. Not even for a second. And then something shifted. Not in the room. In him. Subtle. Almost invisible. But I felt it. The kind of change that happens before a decision is made final. He took one step closer. Just one. Enough to close the space I had been holding on to. Enough to make it clear that distance was no longer something I controlled. The air between us felt different now. Thicker. Charged in a way I could not explain. My breath slowed without my permission, like my body was trying to match the calm he carried so effortlessly. You always do this, he said, his voice low, steady, certain. I blinked. The words did not make sense at first. Always. As if. This was not the first time. As if there was a history I was somehow supposed to remember. My chest tightened. I do not know what you are talking about, I replied, more firmly this time. I needed clarity. I needed this to make sense before the room started to piece together something I could not control. A flicker of something crossed his expression. Not anger. Not frustration. Something quieter. Like recognition meeting resistance. His gaze dropped again, briefly, to my hand resting over my stomach. This time, it stayed there just a second longer. Long enough for my heart to stutter. Long enough for me to feel exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the people around us. When he looked back up, there was no hesitation left. You should have called me, he said. The words landed harder than anything else tonight. Not because of how they sounded, but because of what they implied. Called him. Like there had been a moment I had missed. A choice I had made without knowing the consequences. My throat tightened again, but not from embarrassment this time. From something deeper. Something dangerously close to fear. Not of him. of what he knew. I do not even know you, I said, softer now, the confidence slipping just enough to be real. And for the first time since he had walked into the room, Dominic Russo's expression changed in a way I could not ignore. Not dramatic, not obvious, but enough. Enough to tell me that whatever was happening here, whatever line we had just crossed, it was not one-sided. It never had been. And before I could stop myself, before I could think of a safer way to say it, the question slipped out. Why are you talking like I do? The question did not echo. It settled. Heavy. Real. And for a moment, Dominic did not answer. He just looked at me, like he was measuring something I could not see, like he was deciding how much of the truth I was ready to hear. The room remained silent, but it was no longer the kind of silence that judges. It was the kind that waits. I became aware of everything again all at once. The soft clink of glass somewhere behind me. The faint hum of the air conditioning. The way someone shifted uncomfortably a few feet away. They were still watching. Of course they were. But no one spoke now. No one dared to interrupt whatever this was. My heart beat harder against my ribs, each pulse louder than the last, as if my body was trying to warn me before my mind could catch up. He exhaled slowly, not annoyed, not impatient, just controlled. Always controlled. Because you do, he said. Simple. Direct. Like it was obvious. Like I was the only one refusing to see it. My stomach tightened, my hand instinctively pressing firmer against it, as if that small gesture could anchor me to something steady. That does not explain anything, I replied, my voice quieter now, but still holding. Barely. A flicker of something passed through his eyes again. This time, I recognized it. Not doubt. Not hesitation. It was restraint. Like he was holding back more than he was saying. Like there was a version of this conversation that could have gone very differently if he chose it. He took another step closer. Not invading. Not forcing. Just enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence without him ever touching me. Sophie, he said. My name. Not guessed. Not questioned. Stated. My breath caught. It was not the way people had been saying it tonight. Not with curiosity or quiet judgment. Not like it was something to whisper behind a glass. He said it like it belonged in the open. Like it carried weight. Like it mattered. A chill moved down my spine, slow and deliberate, not from fear, but from recognition that I could not explain. You should not be here alone, he continued, his voice still low, still steady. But there was something else underneath it now. Something protective. Something that did not ask permission. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. I am not alone, I said, almost instinctively, my hand pressing again against my stomach as if to prove the point. His gaze followed the movement. This time, he did not look away quickly. This time, he let the moment sit between us, undeniable. When his eyes lifted back to mine, there was no distance left in them. Only certainty. I know, he said. The words were quiet, but they hit harder than anything else he had said so far. My mind raced, trying to catch up, trying to find logic in something that felt too precise to be coincidence. Then what are you doing? I asked, the question slipping out before I could soften it. It was not accusation. It was confusion. Real. Unfiltered. Because nothing about this made sense unless he knew something I did not. And that thought alone made my chest tighten again. He held my gaze for one more second, long enough that I felt the answer before he even spoke. Then, without raising his voice, without looking at anyone else in the room, he said the words that changed everything. Fixing what should not have happened in the first place. The air shifted again. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough that I felt it in my bones. Because this was no longer just a conversation. This was a line being drawn, and I was standing right in the middle of it. The words did not just hang in the air. They landed. Heavy. Final. Fixing what should not have happened. My chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from something sharper. Something that felt like the edge of a truth I had been avoiding without even realizing it. Around us, the room shifted again. Not with movement. With awareness. People were no longer pretending not to listen. They were careful now. Quiet in a different way. The kind of quiet that comes when something important is unfolding and no one wants to be the one caught on the wrong side of it. I swallowed, my throat dry, my mind trying to catch up to a conversation that felt like it had started long before I arrived tonight. Nothing happened, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, they felt weaker than I wanted them to be. Because something had happened. I just did not understand how he fit into it. Dominic did not argue. He did not raise his voice or correct me. He simply watched me, like he was giving me the space to hear my own words and decide whether I believed them. That was somehow worse. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, just deliberate. And then he did something that shifted everything again. He turned his head slightly. Just enough. Not toward me. Toward the room. It was subtle. Almost nothing. But it was enough. The effect was immediate. Conversations that had been lingering in low whispers disappeared completely. Glasses were set down. Eyes dropped. People who had felt bold enough to speak about me minutes ago suddenly found great interest in the floor, the walls, anything that did not involve being noticed. Power did not need to be announced. It only needed to be recognized. And in that moment, it was fully, completely, without question. My breath caught, not because of him, but because of what it meant. The same people who had reduced me to something small were now shrinking themselves without being told to. And I had not done anything. I had not defended myself. I had not explained. I had just stood there. Slowly, Dominic looked back at me. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just controlled, like everything else about him. You were never supposed to stand here alone, he said quietly. The words were not loud, but they carried further than anything else in the room. Not because of volume. Because of certainty. My fingers tightened slightly against my clutch, my other hand still resting over my stomach, grounding me, reminding me that this was real, that I was still in control of something, even if the rest of the situation felt like it was slipping into a direction I had not chosen. You keep saying that, I replied, my voice softer now, less defensive, more searching. But you are not explaining why. A faint shift in his expression. Not impatience. Something closer to decision. Like he had reached the point where holding back no longer made sense. He took a breath. Slow. Measured. And then he said it. Not to the room. Not to anyone else. Just to me. Because they are speaking about my family. The words did not echo. They did not need to. They settled directly into my chest. Heavy and undeniable. My heart skipped. Just once. But it was enough to make everything else feel louder. My breathing. The silence. The space between us. Family. The word replayed in my mind, over and over, trying to find a place to fit. Trying to make sense of something that felt too large, too sudden, too certain to be a mistake. I shook my head slightly, not in denial, but in confusion I could not hide anymore. That does not make sense, I said quietly. I do not. My voice faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. Enough for him to see. Enough for me. To realize that whatever answer he was about to give was not going to leave me where I was. And when he spoke again, his voice did not change. Still calm. Still controlled. Still certain. It will, he said. And for the first time that night, I believed him. The word stayed with me. Family. It did not fade. It did not soften. It pressed deeper the longer I stood there, trying to make sense of something that refused to fit into anything I understood about my life. My fingers curled slightly against my palm. The small movement the only thing keeping me grounded as my thoughts raced ahead of me. This was not possible. It could not be. I would have known. I would have felt something more than this constant confusion that kept building in my chest. No, I said quietly, shaking my head once, more to myself than to him. You are wrong. The words sounded steady, but they did not feel strong. Not enough to push back against the certainty in his gaze. Dominic did not react immediately. He did not argue. He did not correct me. He simply watched me, like he was waiting for the moment when I would stop fighting something I did not fully understand. That patience unsettled me more than anything else tonight, because it meant he was not guessing. He was sure. The room remained silent around us, but it was no longer distant. I could feel it pressing in again, the weight of people pretending not to listen while hearing everything. I shifted slightly, my shoulders tightening, my hand pressing instinctively over my stomach again, as if protecting something that had suddenly become more exposed than before. His eyes followed the movement. Not with curiosity, with recognition. That same certainty that made my breath catch. You disappeared, he said, his voice still low, still controlled, but there was something different in it now. Something closer to memory. No call. No message. Nothing. My chest tightened. The words hit something inside me, something I had not expected, something that felt dangerously close to familiarity even when I tried to reject it. I did not disappear. I replied, my voice quieter now, less defensive, more uncertain. I never knew where to look. The admission slipped out before I could stop it. Too honest. Too real. And for a moment, the air between us shifted again. Not with tension, with something softer. Something that felt like understanding. Dominic's expression did not change much, but the edge in his gaze eased, just slightly. Enough for me to notice. Enough for me to feel it. You were not supposed to look, he said. I was supposed to find you. The words settled deeper than anything else he had said tonight. Not loud, not dramatic, but final in a way that made my heart stutter again. My grip tightened against my clutch, my thoughts trying to catch up to a version of events I had never been part of. That does not make sense, I whispered, more to myself than to him now. None of this makes sense. And for the first time since he had stepped into my space, Dominic moved differently. Not closer, not away. His hand lifted slightly, not touching me, not crossing any line, just hovering for a brief second in the space between us before lowering again. A gesture that felt instinctive, unplanned, as if he had almost reached for me without thinking. The movement left something behind in the air. Something quiet. Something that made my chest tighten in a way I could not explain. It will, he said again, softer this time. Not a promise. Not a reassurance. Just a statement. Like time itself would eventually catch me up to the truth he was already standing in. I inhaled slowly, trying to steady myself, trying to hold on to something familiar as everything around me continued to shift in ways I could not control. But the ground beneath me did not feel the same anymore. Because for the first time, the question was no longer whether he was telling the truth. It was whether I was ready to hear it. The room felt different now. Not quieter. Not louder. Just aware. Like every person in it could feel something shifting that they did not understand, but no one was brave enough to interrupt. I stood there, caught between what I knew and what he was saying, my thoughts pulling in opposite directions with no place to settle. You were supposed to find me. The words echoed again, softer this time, but deeper. Not just something he said, something he believed. And that was what unsettled me the most. Not the confidence, not the control, the certainty. I exhaled slowly, my fingers loosening slightly against my clutch as I tried to steady myself, to bring logic back into something that felt like it was slipping into something else entirely. When I asked, my voice quieter now, less guarded, more searching. When was I supposed to be found? It was not a challenge. It was a question I needed answered before I could take another step forward in this conversation. Dominic did not hesitate this time. He did not look away or consider his words. He already had the answer. 6 months ago, he said. My breath caught. 6 months. My mind moved instantly, flipping through memories I had not revisited in weeks. The night everything changed. The night I told myself was a mistake. A blur. Something that did not belong in the life I had built for myself. A night I had folded away, sealed off, and refused to open again. My chest tightened as the memory surfaced, not fully clear, but sharp enough to make my pulse quicken. The rain, the quiet, the way everything had felt, still, even when it should not have been. I swallowed, my throat dry again as I forced myself to stay present. That does not prove anything, I said, but the words lacked the strength they once had. Because now there was something behind them. Something I could not ignore. Dominic's gaze did not waver. You left before morning. He continued, his tone steady, not accusing, not harsh. Just factual. No name. No number. Just gone. My heart stumbled again, harder this time, because the details were too specific. Too exact. Not something someone could guess. Not something someone could assume. My fingers tightened instinctively against my stomach, my breath coming in slower, heavier as realization began to creep in, piece by piece, without asking permission. That does not mean, I started, but my voice faltered before I could finish. Because I did not know how to finish that sentence anymore. I did not know how to explain something I had never fully understood myself. The silence between us stretched again, but it was no longer empty. It was full. Full of everything I had avoided. Everything I had chosen not to question. Everything that now stood directly in front of me, impossible to ignore. Dominic took one slow step closer, not enough to overwhelm, just enough to make his presence undeniable. I have been looking for you since that night, he said. The words were quiet, but they carried something I could not mistake. Not anger, not frustration, something steadier, something that had lasted longer than I realized. I looked at him, really looked this time, past the control, past the calm, searching for something that could tell me this was not real, that this was some kind of misunderstanding I could still walk away from. But I did not find it. Instead, I found something else. Something that made my chest tighten in a different way. Something that felt like truth. My hand pressed more firmly against my stomach again, not out of fear, but out of instinct. Protection. Connection. Realization. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place, not all at once, but enough. Enough to make my breath catch. Enough to make my thoughts shift in a direction I had not allowed before. And for the first time since he spoke, I did not argue. I did not deny. I just stood there, caught between what I had believed and what I was starting to understand, as one quiet thought finally surfaced above the rest. What if he was not wrong? The thought did not feel loud. It felt quiet. Dangerous in a different way. What if he was not wrong? It settled somewhere deep, not fully formed, but enough to shift everything I thought I understood about that night, about the past 6 months, about the life I had been trying to hold together on my own. I inhaled slowly, but it did not steady me the way it used to, because now there was something else in the air between us. Something that had not been there before. Recognition. Not complete. Not comfortable. But real. I looked at him again, really looked this time, not at the suit, not at the control, but at the details I had ignored before. The way his gaze never wavered. The way he stood like he had nothing to prove. The way the room itself seemed to adjust around him without him asking it to. And something in my chest tightened, not from fear, but from the realization that this was not a man who made assumptions. This was a man who knew. If you are right, I said slowly, each word careful, deliberate, like stepping onto uncertain ground. Then why did you not find me sooner? The question came out softer than I expected, but it held. It mattered. Because if what he was saying was true, then the silence that followed that night was not just mine. It was his too. Dominic did not look surprised by the question. If anything, he seemed like he had been waiting for it. His jaw shifted slightly, not tense, just controlled, like he was choosing how much to give me at once. I did, he said. The words were simple, but they landed heavier than anything else. My brows pulled together slightly, confusion rising again, sharper this time. That does not make sense, I said, my voice barely above a whisper now. I was not hiding. A faint exhale left him, not frustration, not impatience. Something closer to restraint again. No, he said. You were not. He paused, just for a second, and in that pause, I felt the weight of everything he was about to say. But you were careful. The words settled slowly, like they needed time to reach where they were supposed to land. Careful. My mind moved again, pulling up small details I had not thought about in weeks. The way I had changed my routine. The way I had avoided certain places. The way I had kept everything quiet. Not out of fear. Out of instinct. Out of the need to protect something I did not fully understand yet. My hand pressed more firmly against my stomach again, and this time, I did not try to hide it. Dominic's gaze followed the movement, softer now, but no less certain. You made it difficult, he continued, not accusing, just stating a fact. And I respected that. The words caught me off guard. Not the meaning. The tone. There was no frustration in it. No edge. Just acknowledgement. Like whatever distance had existed between us had not been something he tried to force his way through. My chest tightened again, but differently this time. Not confusion. Not fear. Something quieter. Something that felt like understanding beginning to form where resistance used to be. So you just waited? I asked, the question slipping out before I could filter it. Because that was what it sounded like. Waiting. For me. For this. For a moment neither of us had planned. Dominic held my gaze, steady as ever, but this time there was something new in it. Something that felt less like control and more like truth. No, he said. A small pause. Then, more quietly. I made sure when I found you, no one else would get to you first. The words were not loud. They did not need to be, because they settled into the space around us with a kind of certainty that made everything else feel distant. The room. The people. The whispers that had started this entire night. None of it mattered in that moment. Because for the first time, I understood something I had not seen before. This was never random. Not the silence. Not the timing. Not even this moment. And as that realization settled in, I felt it. Not fear. Not doubt. Something else entirely. Something that felt like the beginning of a truth I could no longer walk away from. The words stayed with me long after he said them. No one else would get to you first. They did not feel like a threat. They did not feel like a warning. They felt like a promise. And that was what unsettled me the most. Because promises like that did not come from nowhere. They came from intention, from decision, from something that had already been set in motion long before I ever realized it. I exhaled slowly, my fingers loosening slightly against my stomach as I tried to steady the rising pressure in my chest. Everything inside me felt like it was shifting, piece by piece, into something I could not ignore anymore. "You are talking like this was inevitable," I said quietly, my voice no longer defensive, but not fully accepting either. Just honest. Just real. Dominic did not deny it. He did not soften it. He simply held my gaze, that same steady certainty grounding everything around him. It was, he said, 2 words. Calm. Unshaken. And somehow, that made it harder to breathe. Because there was no hesitation in him. No doubt. Only a path that he had already decided existed. I looked away for the first time since he stepped in front of me, my eyes drifting briefly across the room. The same people who had been whispering about me earlier were now carefully avoiding even a glance in my direction. Their shoulders were tighter, their posture more controlled, like they were suddenly aware of something they had not seen before, or maybe something they had chosen not to see. The shift was undeniable, and it was not because of anything I had done. It was because of him. Slowly, I looked back at Dominic, my thoughts quieter now, but deeper. "You do not even know me," I said. It was not an argument. It was a truth I needed to hold on to. Something that still felt solid in a situation that was becoming anything but. A faint change crossed his expression. Not disagreement. Not correction. Something more deliberate. "I know enough," he replied. My breath caught again, not because of the words themselves, but because of the way he said them. Like knowing me was not about time. Not about conversations or details. Like it was about something else entirely. Something I had not considered. "You know, one night," I said, my voice softer now, but steadier. "That does not make me your family." The word felt heavier now when I said it. More real. More dangerous. Dominic did not move. He did not step closer or away. He simply stayed exactly where he was, like the distance between us was already exactly what it needed to be. "No," he said quietly. "It does not." For a moment, I thought that was it. That he would leave it there. That the conversation would stay balanced, uncertain, unfinished. But then he continued. And everything shifted again. "This does." His gaze dropped once more, not quickly, not hesitantly, but with full intention, to where my hand rested against my stomach. This time, the moment did not pass. It stayed. It settled. It became undeniable. My breath stopped. Not for long. Just enough to feel it. Enough to make everything else fade for a second. The room. The people. The noise that had filled the night before he arrived. All of it disappeared into something distant and unimportant. Because in that single moment, the line between assumption and truth was no longer blurred. It was clear. I felt my fingers press more firmly against my stomach, not out of fear, not out of instinct to hide, but out of something else. Recognition. Connection. Reality. My voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "You cannot know that." It was the last piece of resistance I had. The last place I could stand before everything changed completely. Dominic's eyes lifted back to mine, steady as ever, but this time there was something deeper in them. Not just certainty. Something that felt like claim. Not loud. Not forced. Just present. "I do," he said. And for the first time, I did not have an answer that could push back against it. His certainty did not feel loud. It felt immovable, like something that had already been decided long before I stood here trying to question it. I held his gaze, searching for hesitation, for doubt, for anything that would give me space to breathe again. But there was nothing. Only that same steady presence that had not shifted since the moment he walked into the room. My chest rose slowly as I took a breath that did not fully settle. Because now the silence between us was no longer empty. It was filled with something real. Something I could not ignore anymore. "You cannot just decide that," I said quietly, my voice steady but softer than before. Not a denial. Not entirely. Just a boundary I needed to hold on to, even if it was slipping. Dominic did not react to the challenge. He did not step forward. He did not step back. He simply stood there, like the distance between us no longer mattered. "I am not deciding," he said. "I am recognizing." The words settled differently. Not forceful. Not demanding. But grounded in something that felt deeper than assumption. My fingers curled slightly against my palm, my other hand still resting against my stomach, no longer hiding it, no longer pretending it was something small. Because it was not small. It had never been small. And now, standing in front of him, it felt impossible to treat it like it was. I glanced down for a brief second, my breath catching as the reality of everything pressed closer than it had before. Then I looked back up at him. "And what does that mean?" I asked. The question came out more vulnerable than I intended, but I did not take it back. I needed to hear it. I needed to know what he thought this was. What he thought I was to him. Dominic's expression did not change, but something in his gaze deepened, like the answer mattered more than anything else in the room. "It means," he said slowly, "you are not standing here alone anymore." My breath stilled. Just for a second. Long enough to feel it. Long enough to understand that he was not talking about the room. Not about the people who had been watching. Not about the whispers that had started this night. He was talking about something else. Something bigger. Something that reached beyond this moment. I swallowed, my throat tightening slightly as I tried to steady myself again. "That is not your decision to make," I replied, but there was no edge left in my voice now. Only uncertainty. Only the quiet realization that I was no longer standing in the same place I had been when this started. Dominic's gaze did not waver. Not even for a second. "You are right," he said. A small pause. Then, more quietly, "It is yours." The words caught me off guard. Not because of what they meant, but because of what they did not do. They did not trap me. They did not force me. They gave me space. And somehow, that felt heavier than anything else he could have said. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders loosening just slightly as the tension shifted into something else. Something I could not quite name yet. My eyes drifted again, just briefly, across the room. The same people. The same space. But it no longer felt the same. Because I was not standing in it the same way. When I looked back at him, something had changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But enough. Enough that the question forming in my chest was no longer about whether he was wrong. It was about what I was going to do if he was right. My fingers pressed gently against my stomach again, not out of instinct to protect, but out of something quieter. Something steadier. And when I spoke again, my voice was softer than before, but clearer. "And if I say no?" The question lingered between us, not as resistance, but as truth. Because whatever this was, whatever he believed, whatever was unfolding in front of both of us, it was no longer just his to claim. It was mine to accept, or walk away from. Dominic held my gaze, that same calm, unshaken presence surrounding him, and for the first time since he stepped into my world, I felt it. Not pressure, not control, something else, something that felt like choice. The question did not shake him. It did not surprise him. It settled between us like something he had already considered long before I asked it. "If I say no?" I watched him closely, searching for the reaction that would tell me what kind of man he really was beneath the control, beneath the calm. Because this was the moment that mattered. Not what he claimed, not what he believed, but what he would do when I did not immediately give him what he wanted. Dominic did not move. Not closer. Not away. His posture remained the same, grounded, steady, like nothing about this situation made him uncertain. But something in his eyes shifted. Not darker. Not colder. Something quieter. Something that felt like understanding. "Then you say no?" he replied. The answer was immediate. Simple. No hesitation. No pressure. And somehow, that made it harder to breathe. Because I had expected resistance. I had expected him to push. To insist. To remind me of everything he had just said like it was something I could not walk away from. But he did not. He left the choice exactly where it belonged. With me. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from something else entirely. Something that felt like the ground beneath me had shifted again, but this time in a way that did not trap me. It gave me space, and I did not know what to do with that. I looked at him, really looked, trying to reconcile the man in front of me with everything I had heard, everything I had assumed. Powerful, untouchable, a man who did not wait for permission. And yet here he was, waiting, not because he had to, because he chose to. The realization settled slowly, but when it did, it changed something inside me. My hand moved slightly against my stomach, not pressing, just resting there, feeling the quiet reminder of what mattered most in this moment. This was not just about me anymore. It had not been for a while, and that made every decision heavier, more real. "And you would just walk away?" I asked, my voice softer now, less guarded, more honest than I intended. The question was not about him leaving. It was about whether everything he had said would disappear the moment I did not accept it. Dominic held my gaze, steady as ever, but this time there was something deeper in it. Something that felt like truth without force. No, he said. A small pause. Then, more quietly, I would step back. The difference mattered. I felt it immediately. Walk away meant gone. Finished. No return. But step back, that meant something else. That meant space. That meant distance without disappearance. That meant he was not here for a moment. He was here for something longer. My breath slowed. My thoughts quieter now, not because I had answers, but because the questions were becoming clearer. I looked down briefly, my fingers brushing lightly against the fabric over my stomach, grounding myself again in something real, something that was not uncertain. Then I looked back up at him. The room around us still felt distant, like it had been pushed to the edges of something neither of us had planned, but both of us were now standing in. "You are very sure of yourself?" I said quietly. It was not a challenge. Not anymore. Just an observation. Dominic's expression did not change much, but there was the faintest shift, something almost like acknowledgement. "Not about everything," he replied. And for the first time, there was something human in the way he said it. Not perfect. Not untouchable. Just real. My chest tightened again, but this time it was not confusion. It was something else. Something that felt like the beginning of trust, even if I was not ready to name it yet. I held his gaze for a moment longer, then let out a slow breath, the weight of everything settling differently than it had before. Because now the question was no longer whether I could walk away. It was whether I wanted to. The question lingered in my chest longer than anything else he had said. Not whether I could walk away. Whether I wanted to. It was quieter than everything before it, but heavier in a way I could not ignore. Because for the first time tonight, the decision was not about defending myself, or explaining, or surviving the judgment in the room. It was about choosing something. Choosing him. Or choosing distance. And that felt more real than anything else. I exhaled slowly, my fingers brushing lightly against my stomach again, grounding myself in the one truth that had never shifted, no matter how complicated everything else had become. I was not alone. Not really. I had not been for a while. The difference now was that someone else knew it too. Someone else was standing in front of me, not questioning it, not doubting it, just accepting it like it had always been his to understand. I lifted my gaze back to him, studying his face, not for control, not for power, but for something simpler, something honest. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. He was not trying to take something from me. He was offering something I had not realized I needed. Stability. Presence. A place where I did not have to explain why I deserved to stand there. My chest tightened slightly at the thought, not from fear, but from the weight of it. Because accepting that meant letting go of something else. The part of me that had been holding everything alone. The part that believed I had to. "You make it sound easy," I said quietly, my voice softer now, but steady. Like I can just decide and everything changes. Dominic did not interrupt. He did not correct. He just listened, the same way he had from the beginning. "It is not easy," he said after a moment. "It is just clear." The words settled differently. Not simplifying anything. Not dismissing what I felt. Just placing it where it belonged. In front of me. Where I could see it for what it was. A choice. I looked away briefly, my eyes drifting again across the room. The same people were still there, but they felt distant now. Smaller. Not because they had changed, but because I had. Their opinions no longer pressed against me the same way. Their whispers no longer held the same weight. Because for the first time, I was not standing alone in them. I let out a slow breath, then looked back at him. The space between us no longer felt uncertain. It felt intentional, like something had been built there without either of us forcing it. "And if I stay?" I asked, the question quiet, but clear. It was not a test. It was not hesitation. It was the truth of where I stood now. Dominic's gaze did not waver. Not even for a second. But this time, there was something else in it. Not just certainty. Something warmer. Something that felt like promise without being spoken. "Then you do not have to explain yourself to anyone again," he said. The words were simple, but they carried something deeper than anything else tonight. Not control. Not ownership. Just protection. My breath caught slightly, not from surprise, but from the way it settled into something inside me that had been tired for longer than I realized. Tired of proving. Tired of justifying. Tired of standing alone in a room full of people who had already decided who I was without asking. My hand rested gently against my stomach again, and this time, I did not feel the need to hide it. Not from him. Not from anyone. Because for the first time, it did not feel like something that made me smaller. It felt like something that made me stronger. I held his gaze for a moment longer, the weight of everything finally settling into something steady, something I could stand on without feeling like it would shift beneath me. And when I spoke again, my voice was quiet, but certain. Not because everything was clear, but because for the first time, I was not afraid of what came next. I am tired of standing alone. The words did not echo. They did not need to. Because they were not just something I said. They were something I had finally accepted. The words settled between us, quiet but undeniable. I am tired of standing alone. I felt them leave me, felt the weight of them linger in the space we shared, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. The room, the people, the judgment that had filled every corner when the night began. None of it mattered the same way anymore. Because I had said something true. Not for them. Not for him. For me. Dominic did not respond immediately. He did not rush to fill the silence or turn it into something dramatic. He just stood there, looking at me in a way that felt different now. Not like he was assessing. Not like he was deciding. Like he understood. Slowly, deliberately, he closed the distance between us. Not enough to overwhelm. Just enough to stand beside me instead of in front of me. The shift was subtle, but it changed everything. Because now he was not something I had to face. He was something I could stand with. I felt it before I fully processed it. That difference. That quiet adjustment. That did not take anything from me, but added something I had not realized I was missing. My breath steadied. My shoulders relaxing just slightly as the tension that had been holding me all night finally began to loosen. Not disappear, but ease. His presence did not press against me. It grounded me. Without thinking, my hand moved again to rest against my stomach, and this time, I did not feel exposed. I did not feel judged. I felt certain. Dominic's gaze followed the movement, but there was no intensity in it now. No sharp edge. Just acknowledgement. Just quiet understanding. And then, without looking away from me, he spoke. Not loudly. Not for the room. Just enough for me to hear. Then you will not stand alone again. The words were simple, but they carried something deeper than anything else he had said tonight. Not a command. Not a claim. A promise. And this time, it did not unsettle me. It settled me. Around us, the room remained silent, but the silence had changed. It was no longer watching me. It was watching us. The same people who had whispered, who had judged, who had decided who I was before I ever spoke, were now standing still, uncertain, careful. Not because I had proven anything to them, but because something had shifted that they could not ignore. I lifted my gaze slowly, meeting their eyes for the first time without looking away. Not challenging, not defensive, just steady. And for the first time, they were the ones who looked uncertain, who looked away first, who adjusted their posture like they were suddenly aware of something they had missed, or maybe something they had chosen not to see. I did not say anything to them. I did not need to, because this was not about proving them wrong. It was about no longer needing their approval to feel right. I turned slightly, just enough to stand fully beside Dominic, not behind him, not hidden, but present, equal in a way that felt quiet but powerful. And as I stood there, I realized something I had not understood before. He did not change who I was. He changed what I accepted, what I allowed, what I believed I deserved. The room still looked the same. The lights, the music, the people, but I did not feel the same inside it. Because, for the first time, I was not shrinking to fit into it. I was standing in it, fully, without apology. And as the silence stretched just a little longer, I understood the truth I had been avoiding all night. He did not save me. He stood beside me until I remembered I did not need saving.